The sun was just beginning to paint the sky in soft pinks and golds when the terminal at Orlando International Airport stirred to life. Travelers, bleary-eyed but eager for new destinations, clustered around ticket counters and information boards. Rolling suitcases hummed across polished floors, and the scent of fresh coffee wove through the air. Among the early arrivals, Naomi Ruiz stood behind the gate desk at seat 12, her name badge gleaming under the bright overhead lights. Clad in a crisp airline uniform, she moved with practiced efficiency, her eyes flicking between the boarding manifest, on her clipboard and the digital screen displaying upcoming flights. Naomi had worked as a gate agent for nearly 5 years. Every morning she arrived before dawn, traded the quiet of her car's heater for the bustle of pre-flight checks. She greeted passengers with a polite smile, scanned boarding passes, and directed people to their seats. On regular days, her job felt routine, almost like clockwork. Yet in all those years she had learned that routine could break in a heartbeat. A last-minute aircraft swap, a confused traveler seeking a seat upgrade, or a flight delay could turn an ordinary morning into a whirlwind of customer complaints and fuming supervisors. This particular morning promised to be uneventful until Darnell King appeared. He arrived at gate C12 carrying a sleek black briefcase and wearing a tailored charcoal suit that whispered of quiet confidence. His shoes made a soft tap-tap on the tile floor, and his posture spoke of someone accustomed to authority. Darnell was a seasoned executive, head of a mid-sized investment firm based in Atlanta, used to negotiating multi-million-dollar deals without ever losing his calm. He had flown hundreds of times, and airports were, for him, just another venue for business to unfold. As Darnell approached the gate desk, Naomi glanced over from her clipboard. Her eyes registered the name on his boarding pass, King, DH Flight 407 to New York, first class. Without looking up, she scanned the pass with her handheld reader and tapped a few keys on her terminal. Coffee in one hand, she juggled the boarding cards for the next group of passengers. She felt the treadmill of her morning routine pull her toward efficiency, not curiosity. "Good morning, sir," she said, tone polite but brisk. Her eyes stayed glued to the computer screen. "May I see your boarding pass and ID, please?" Darnell placed his pass on the counter. "Certainly," he replied, sliding out his passport with a practiced gesture. Naomi took both and peered at the documents. He was well within his rights to board first class according to the system. Yet something in the way he spoke, the unhurried calm, made Naomi's fingers dance a little slower on the keyboard. She rubbed a weary thumb across her lip as she processed his information. In the microseconds before she uttered her next words, Naomi's mind drifted to the challenges she had faced just the day before. A passenger who refused to show his vaccine card, a screaming toddler who had thrown juice on her uniform, and a last-minute gate change that took half the staff by surprise. Her cheeks burned with exhaustion. Looking up at Darnell's calm expression, she felt a flash of impatience. "Just wait here," she muttered under her breath, louder than intended. Darnell raised an eyebrow but remained silent. He had heard worse in high-powered boardrooms. He leaned on the counter, waiting patiently. Naomi tapped away at her terminal, her silence stretching until the tension between them grew thick. Other passengers in line shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flicking between the two of them. Everything in that moment felt sharper. The hiss of the terminal doors, the distant squeal of suitcase wheels, the soft hum of the boarding announcement barely audible over the clatter. When Naomi finally looked up again, she saw the brief glimmer of hurt in Darnell's eyes, just a flicker, but enough. "Sir, you tried to board through the priority lane," she said, voice firmer now. "That's only for passengers with a frequent flyer status." Her tone held the weight of command. She did not intend rudeness, but her words landed like a slap. Darnell's mouth tightened, but he maintained his composure. Interrupting the charged silence, a coworker called Naomi's name from across the lobby. Naomi glanced away, seizing the distraction. Quick as a blink, she handed Darnell's boarding pass back to him. "Go to gate C14, she instructed, nodding toward the direction. "You can board from there in a few minutes." Naomi turned on her heel, leaving Darnell still standing by the counter, his passport tucked under his arm. Darnell watched her walk away, puzzled. He flipped over his boarding pass in his hand, searching for any clues as to why she had sent him elsewhere. Then he realized Gate C-14 was not where his flight originated. It was for a completely different airline. He frowned, took a steadying breath, and stepped toward Naomi's colleague at the next podium. Within seconds, he had the correct gate, information, and made his way down the corridor toward C-14. But Naomi's muttered remark, "Don't act like you own the place," still burned in his memory. He felt the familiar sting of being underestimated because of his appearance, yet he also knew that anger would do no good here. Better, he thought, to stay calm and see this through. After all, the sky was big enough for everyone, and soon he would be flying above it all, far away from the petty hassles of ground level. Behind Naomi, the terminal continued its steady flow of passengers. She wiped her forehead with a paper towel she kept in her pocket, shaking off the tension. She had no idea that the man she had dismissed so brusquely was not just another traveler. He was someone whose name would one day be displayed on the very gates she managed. In that moment, though, she simply saw a late passenger, another day's problem to solve before the next boarding call. The hum of activity swirled around her, and she braced herself for the rest of the morning, unaware of how drastically her routine would soon be upended. Naomi's words hung in the air, sharper than she intended. "Don't act like you own the place," she had snapped, her voice low but cutting. For a moment, everything froze. The soft rolling of suitcases, the distant click of high heels, even the blare of the boarding announcement seemed to pause. Darnell King felt the sting of her remark even before he fully processed it. He glanced at Naomi, whose brow was furrowed and lips pressed together, then back at the stream of passengers, forming behind him. He kept his tone steady. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean any trouble," he said quietly, sliding his boarding pass back toward her. His calm, measured voice was nothing like the hurried, irritated tone she had used. But beneath that calm lay a familiar ache. Over the years, Darnell had been good at holding himself together in moments like this, moments when others made assumptions based on how he looked, rather than who he was. He told himself that this exchange would soon be forgotten, just another small bump in his busy day. Behind him, a tall businessman with a thick briefcase cleared his throat and stepped around. "Excuse me," he said politely, flashing his own boarding pass. Naomi nodded and moved on without a word, motioning for him to place his ID on the scanner. The line advanced and Darnell was left standing slightly apart as if he were invisible. He straightened his posture, adjusted his suit jacket, and took a deep breath. Then he walked to the side, away from the gate desk, so Naomi and the new passenger could continue their task. Naomi turned to the next person, still scowling. She glanced over her shoulder and caught sight of Darnell's retreating figure. She frowned, annoyed that he hadn't argued back, but also surprised by the discomfort she felt in her chest. Something about his quiet confidence had made her own irritation flare higher than usual. She shook her head slightly as though to clear the thought, and tapped the new passenger's boarding pass against the scanner. Meanwhile, Darnell found a low-backed seat a few feet from the gate. He set his briefcase on the floor, placed his elbows on his knees, and stared at the digital display board. Flight 407 to New York would board in about 10 minutes. He watched passengers gather, families, businessmen, students with backpacks, and game controllers, and listened to the general hum of the terminal. He told himself over and over that he would let this go, that his life was too full of meetings, strategy sessions, and travel plans to be derailed by a single rude comment. But he couldn't quite shake the tightness in his chest. He remembered other times he had faced subtle and not so subtle slights. A colleague questioning his credentials in a meeting, a server hovering over his table as if ready to pounce on any mistake, a driver letting the door close in his face. Each time he had reminded himself to stay calm, to rise above. Today would be no different. He sent a quick text to his assistant. "Boarding call is in 10. Then he closed his eyes for a second and imagined stepping onto his private jet, instead of this crowded cabin. Back at the desk, Naomi took a deep breath. She felt guilty, both for her tone and for the snap judgment she had made. She prided herself on being professional, on treating every passenger with courtesy, regardless of their status. Yet today her patience had frayed, and she had let exhaustion guide her words. She rubbed her temples and eyed the next flight's manifest. A family with 3 small children was supposed to board in 5 minutes. She braced herself for the usual chaos of lost passports and spilled juice boxes. As Naomi adjusted the passenger list, her supervisor, Marcus, appeared at her side. He was tall, with an easy smile and a habit of patting employees on the back. "How are we doing here?" he asked, glancing at the line. Naomi hesitated before answering. "Just a rough start," she admitted. Marcus gave her a sympathetic nod. "Look, take a breath. It'll smooth out. And hey, if something happens, you know who to call." He tapped the earpiece in his ear and winked. Naomi managed a small smile. She appreciated his confidence in her, even though she felt shaken. Meanwhile, Darnell rose when he heard the final boarding call. He straightened his tie and picked up his briefcase. He spotted Naomi at the desk again. Her posture relaxed a little, her expression neutral. He approached, ready to present his pass one more time. But before he could speak, a different gate agent took over. She smiled brightly at him, scanned his boarding pass, and waved him forward without a word. As Darnell stepped onto the jet bridge, he felt the tension loosen. The earlier exchange faded, replaced by the familiar sounds of pre-flight preparations, the gentle roar of engines in the distance, the hiss of the cabin doors opening, the quiet murmur of flight attendants greeting passengers. He offered a polite nod to the agent and found his seat by the window, stowed his briefcase in the overhead bin, and settled in. The sky outside was a brilliant blue, and he told himself that soon he would be above any petty frustrations of ground level. Back in the terminal, Naomi watched as passengers filtered through. She glanced at the counter clock, 5 minutes to the next boarding. She gripped the boarding pass scanner firmly and readied herself for the next round. But her mind drifted, back to the man in the charcoal suit. She forced herself to stay focused. This was no time for self-reflection when dozens of travelers needed assistance. But she couldn't ignore the lesson she just learned. Her tone, her words, her assumptions, they had power. And until she mastered them, she might keep making the same mistakes. Inevitably, every busy shift has its moments of stress and its small victories. By the time Flight 407 had taken off, Naomi had helped calm an anxious mother, rerouted a passenger whose luggage had gone to the wrong city, and managed a seat swap for 2 friends who wanted to sit together. She finished her pre-flight checklist and prepared to move on to gate C14, unaware that the owner of the very airline she served sat just miles above her, watching his next destination approach on the horizon. And though that moment of insult already felt distant to Darnell, Naomi's words would echo in her mind for days to come. Reminders that even in the routine hum of an airport terminal, every passenger is someone with a story, a status, and the right to be treated with respect. In those few seconds, she had lost her own sense of courtesy, and while it remained a small misstep in the grand scheme, it was powerful enough to change how she saw her job and how she would perform it from that point forward. Naomi returned to her desk after a quick break, her mind still lingering on the morning's rush. She wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead and settled into her chair, glancing at the next flight's manifest. She tapped a few keys to bring up the list of passengers due to board on Flight 514 to Chicago, but her eyes drifted to a small notification icon in the corner of her screen. It wasn't the blinking red alerts she was used to. Those meant delayed planes or gate changes, but a single gold star next to her supervisor's name. Curious, she clicked it. A pop-up window appeared showing an internal memo from the airline's headquarters. It began with a congratulatory tone. "Congratulations to Gate C12 for handling Flight 407's boarding this morning." Naomi's chest tightened. She remembered Flight 407. It had left 30 minutes ago heading to New York. She had sent its VIP passenger to the wrong gate before a colleague had rescued him. The memo detailed how operations had gone smoothly after that hiccup, but it reserved special praise for Naomi by name. Her face flushed. She should have felt proud. Instead, She felt dread. She scrolled down. There, outlined in bold, was a list of passengers whose presence aboard Flight 407 held special significance. One name was highlighted, Darnell H. King. Next to it, under a column titled Roll, was the simple phrase, Owner King Air. Her heart pounded loud enough for her to hear it in her ears. Owner of the airline, King indeed. She read, and reread the words as though the screen might be playing a trick on her. She rubbed her eyes, but the letters stayed the same. Darnellhking. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. She remembered the way he stood in front of her, his posture straight, his suit impeccable. She remembered the flicker of pain in his eyes when she barked at him, assuming he was just another impatient traveler. The realization struck her like a cold wave. She had not only insulted an innocent passenger, she had insulted the very person, responsible for every gate, every flight, and every uniform she wore. Her hands trembled as she clicked on his name. A small profile window expanded, revealing a professional photo of Darnell King. He looked calm and composed, a slight smile on his lips. Underneath, a short biography detailed how he had founded King Air 15 years ago, with a single propeller plane, and grown it into one of the country's fastest-growing airlines. His company employed thousands of people, including the very staff who greeted passengers at gates across the nation. Naomi swallowed hard. She felt as though she had stabbed herself in the foot, and then handed him the knife. Alarm bells rang in her head. What if he had filed a complaint? What if he told his executive team about the incident? Naomi imagined her supervisor, Marcus, reading her name in a report and shaking his head. She could already hear her colleagues whispering, "She's the one who insulted King Air's owner." She clicked close on the profile and pressed her palms against her eyes, willing the world to stop spinning. Turning back to the memo, Naomi spotted another link. View passenger feedback. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the trackpad. Her curiosity warred with her fear. Finally, she clicked. A feedback form appeared showing comments from travelers on Flight 407. Crew was professional and friendly. Smooth boarding process. Nothing negative except one line buried between compliments. Gate agent at C-12 was unhelpful and rude. Beneath it, an anonymous note added, "Sent me to the wrong gate first," then mumbled something about attitudes. Naomi's chest tightened further. She could almost hear Darnell's quiet apology in her memory. She had dismissed his kindness with impatience. She closed the feedback window and sank lower in her chair. The terminal noise, PA announcements, rolling suitcases, distant laughter, pricked at her nerves. Normally she had a strong stomach for the hustle and bustle of an airport, but now every sound felt magnified. She pressed her temples, trying to shake the images from her mind. Her own harsh words, the look on his face, the weight of that internal memo. Naomi stood abruptly, gathering her things. She needed fresh air. She walked down the corridor toward the terminal windows, her steps echoing against the polished floor. Outside, planes taxied in neat lines, their engines humming as they prepared for takeoff. She watched a King Air jet, emblazoned with a Blue Crown logo, glide smoothly past the gate. That was his company. That was his pride. And she had cheapened it with her careless remark. As she leaned against the cool glass, Naomi replayed the morning in her mind. She remembered checking in a family whose luggage tag had fallen off. She remembered the screaming toddler whose juice had spilled on the carpet. She remembered the last-minute seat shuffle for 3 friends. In the midst of all those tasks, she had felt weighed down and frustrated, but none of that justified her tone toward Darnell. She whispered an apology into the empty terminal, hoping the words would somehow carry through the glass and reach him. A soft vibration in her pocket jolted her back to reality. It was a text from Marcus. "Nice work on the memo, I'll see you in my office for a quick chat." Her stomach tightened. This was no ordinary chat. She knew he'd seen the same alert she had. She squared her shoulders and walked back to gate C-12, each step heavy with anticipation. The gate was quieter now. Most travelers for Flight 407 had long since disappeared into the jet bridge. The desk felt smaller, as if it were closing in on her. Marcus sat behind a small fold-out table set up beside the desk. He gestured for Naomi to sit. His expression was neutral but kind, his usual easy smile replaced by something more serious. Naomi swallowed and forced herself to meet his eyes. "You saw the memo?" he asked softly. Naomi nodded. Her voice caught in her throat. "Yes," she whispered. He leaned forward. "I want you to know that Flight 407 went exceptionally well. Better than expected, actually. Passengers were happy, crew reported smooth boarding, and we even saved a bit on ground time." He paused and unfolded his hands. "Part of that success is credited to you. But I also saw the feedback. I saw the note about your interaction with Mr. King." Her stomach dropped. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I had no idea it was him. I didn't mean to be rude. I was tired and I made a bad assumption." Marcus nodded. "I understand. This job can be tough, but we treat every passenger with respect no matter who they are. Mr. King is the reason we're all here, but he's also a person with feelings, just like anyone else." He gave her a steady look. "I'll be passing your apology on to him. He's a fair man. He'll appreciate that you admitted your mistake, but I also want you to reflect on how quick we can be to judge someone without knowing their story." Naomi swallowed and wiped her eyes. "Yes, sir, I will. I promise." Marcus smiled gently. "Good. And Naomi, you're a talented gate agent. I've seen you handle stressful situations with grace. This was a one-off. Learn from it and move forward. We'll schedule you for a sensitivity workshop next week. It's part of a new initiative Mr. King asked for, to help staff better understand unconscious bias." He handed her a printed schedule. "You're enrolled." She took the paper with trembling hands. Opening it, she saw the workshop dates and descriptions, real-life scenarios, role-playing exercises, discussions about empathy. She nodded, determination replacing some of her shame. "Thank you," she said. "I'll be there." As she left Marcus's makeshift office, Naomi paused to look at the terminal again. Through the glass, she could just make out the tail of the King Airjet fading into the sky. She thought of Darnell King aboard that plane, moving on with his day, unaware that she had repackaged his image in her mind. From an entitled customer to the very owner of the airline, she vowed she would approach every passenger from now on with an open mind. No assumptions, no prejudice. Back at her desk, she found an email notification, a message from headquarters. She clicked it and read a short sentence. "Thank you for your ongoing dedication. We value your commitment to excellence." At the bottom, Mr. King's name was printed in neat letters. Naomi exhaled a shaky breath and closed her laptop gently, as if afraid to disturb the moment. In that quiet stillness, she understood something profound. A single moment of awareness, however uncomfortable, could change the way she saw her job and the people she served. And though she could never undo her harsh words, she could use the experience to become better, kinder, and more respectful. With renewed purpose, Naomi picked up her headset and prepared for the next boarding call, determined to greet each traveler as if they might hold her future in their hands. Naomi's heart raced as she stepped off the elevator at the small conference room near Gate C12. The midday sun slanted through the windows, casting long patterns of light on the carpet. In her hand, she clutched a neatly folded note of apology she had written in the quiet break room. No excuses, just an honest admission of her mistake and a promise to do better. She smoothed her uniform, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Inside, Darnell King sat alone at a round table, scrolling through emails on his tablet. His polished shoes reflected the sunlight, and his calm demeanor made Naomi's nerves flutter. She cleared her throat softly. "Mr. King," she began, voice trembling just enough to remind her how real this moment was. He looked up, his expression open but curious. Naomi swallowed. She placed the folded note on the table and sank into the chair across from him. She folded her hands in her lap and looked down. "I'm Naomi Ruiz," she said, voice low. I'm the gate agent who spoke to you this morning. I owe you an apology. Darnell leaned back, tapping his fingers on the table's smooth surface. He gave a small nod, encouraging her to continue. Naomi unfolded the paper and read slowly, making sure each word felt true. I'm sorry for the rude way I spoke to you and for sending you to the wrong gate. I let my frustration guide my words and I was wrong. You deserved respect. I hope you can forgive me. She folded the note again and pushed it toward him. He picked it up, glanced at the neat handwriting, then looked into her eyes. Thank you for telling me that, he said softly. His voice carried no anger, only sincerity. Naomi felt her shoulders relax a fraction. She had feared dismissal or anger, but instead found kindness. Darnell placed the note in his pocket. I appreciate your apology, he continued. We all have busy days. I understand that. Naomi exhaled, relief warming her chest. She dared to meet his gaze. I want to make amends. If there's any way I can help fix what I did, I will. Darnell regarded her thoughtfully. What happened today highlights a bigger problem. Not just here, but everywhere people make quick judgments. I've seen it all my life. But it also taught me something. When someone admits a mistake, it creates an opportunity to learn. He paused, then tapped his tablet. I've been working on a new company-wide program about empathy and bias. It's called Gateways to Respect. I'd like your help. I want real stories from real employees who have faced these moments so that others can learn. Naomi felt her mouth go dry. He was offering her a chance to shape training for thousands of employees. Her mistake had become a springboard for change. I'd be honored, she whispered. Doubt flickered momentarily. Could she speak in front of peers? But the sincerity in his offer erased her uncertainty. Great, Darnell said, smiling. Let's draft some ideas now. Tell me what you think would help your colleagues. Naomi took out a small notebook and pen from her purse. They spent the next hour brainstorming. First, they sketched an outline for a role-playing exercise. One person acts as a gate agent under stress, the other as a passenger with a hidden identity. They would swap roles afterward and reflect on how assumptions felt from both sides. Naomi recalled the exhaustion she'd felt this morning, the line of passengers pressing behind her, and how easy it was to forget that each person had their own story. She described that moment to Darnell, who nodded and jotted notes. Next, they talked about a group discussion module. Darnell suggested small circles where agents could share brief stories of times they'd misjudged someone and times they'd been misunderstood themselves. Naomi hesitated, then shared her experience, how she saw a well-dressed man and assumed entitlement, unaware he owned the company she worked for. Her cheeks warmed as she recounted her words, but Darnell listened without judgment. Vulnerability builds trust, he said quietly. They then sketched feedback surveys for trainees to complete after each session, asking what they learned and how they planned to change their actions. Naomi suggested a simple prompt. Name one assumption you made this week and how you will challenge it next time. Darnell smiled broadly at that. Perfect, he said. It's short, direct, and gives people a chance to pause and think. The hour wound down. Naomi realized her hands were no longer shaking. She felt energized by purpose instead of fear. Darnell closed his tablet and stood, offering her a hand. She took it, grinning despite herself. Thank you for being so gracious. Today, she said. He shook his head. Thank you for your honesty and courage. It's not easy to admit when you're wrong. They agreed to meet again next week to finalize the workshop materials. Naomi left the conference room with a lightness she hadn't known all day. In the terminal, the bustle of passengers felt different, less stressful, more human. She greeted each traveler with renewed warmth, reminding herself that behind every boarding pass was a person with hopes, worries, and value. That evening at home, Naomi drafted personal notes to deliver in the workshop's introduction. A short story of her mistake and of Darnell's response. She wanted every agent to see that respect and kindness could heal errors and build bridges. She reread her note to Mr. King and smiled to herself, imagining him in a meeting room at headquarters, expanding his airline with the same grace he'd shown her. The next morning, as Naomi returned to Gate C12, she felt a quiet confidence. She scanned boarding passes with extra care, offered genuine smiles, and spoke in a tone that said, "I see you." And though she never knew if passengers recognized the change, she carried with her the lesson that a single apology, met with understanding, could ripple outward, transforming not just one mortified gate agent and one forgiving owner, but the entire culture of an airline. In those days that followed, Naomi and Darnell's workshop outline took shape. It traveled from the small conference room by Gate C12 to the training centers at headquarters, then to gates across the nation. And every time Naomi thought of that morning's mistake, she reminded herself that respect cannot be assumed. It must be chosen, again and again, in every interaction on the ground and in the sky. The morning of the first Gateways to Respect workshop, the training room buzzed with quiet excitement. Naomi arrived early, laying out name tags and pens on the long tables. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft lines across the pale walls. One by one, gate agents in uniform filed in. Some chatted nervously, others sat quietly scanning the room. When Darnell King stepped to the front, dressed more casually than Naomi had ever seen him, a hush fell. He greeted everyone with a warm smile and thanked them for taking time from their busy schedules. Naomi watched as his easy manner settled the room, and she felt a surge of pride knowing this program had grown from her own mistake and his forgiveness. Darnell began by sharing a brief story, not about profits or schedules, but about empathy. He spoke of the day someone assumed he was just another passenger, and how much it stung. He paused, looking around the room, and said, "We have the power to shape a traveler's experience with every word and every gesture." Naomi could see heads nodding as agents recognized their own small frustrations at crowded gates and long lines. Then she stood and introduced the first exercise, role-playing the morning's incident. Two volunteers came forward, one as the tired gate agent, the other as the confident executive. As the scene unfolded, Naomi guided the participants. "Notice how quickly judgments form when we are under pressure." The agent snapped, lines similar to Naomi's real words, while the executive responded with calm dignity, just as Darnell had. Afterward, everyone paused and talked about how it felt to be on each side. Some confessed they had never realized how small comments could create big wounds. Others admitted they had felt invisible or dismissed in their own lives. The room, once stiff with nerves, now buzzed with open conversation. Naomi felt a warm glow as agents shared real stories, about passengers who ignored them, and about times they themselves had misjudged a traveler. Next came a group discussion. Agents broke into small circles and took turns describing a moment, when they had made an assumption, and what they learned afterward. One young agent spoke of a businessman who looked angry but was actually worried about a sick family member. Another told of a teenage backpacker whose nervous laughter she mistook for rudeness. Each story ended with a simple question: how could I have paused and asked instead of assumed? The answers: count to 3 before speaking, offer, help without judgment, use a calm tone even when I'm busy, felt both obvious and revolutionary. After a short break, Darnell explained the feedback survey they would use in daily work. A single prompt asking agents to name one assumption they made each day and how they would correct it next time. Naomi demonstrated how to fill it out online, and agents laughed as she jokingly confessed, "Today I assumed I'd get through check-in without a single lost bag. Wrong." The light moment reminded everyone that perfection wasn't the goal. Awareness was. She watched colleagues lean forward, keen to test this tool at their own gates. In the weeks that followed, the lessons took root. Naomi returned to Gate C12 with renewed energy. When a businessman in a hurry barked for extra legroom, she paused, took a breath, and asked, "Is there something I can do to help make your flight more comfortable today?" His surprised look turned into a grateful smile, and he thanked her before boarding. At Gate C15, another agent named Omar used the feedback, survey after he had sent a mother with twins through security, without explaining priority lines. He noted the mistake and promised himself, "Next time I'll guide her with clear instructions." One afternoon, Naomi glanced up to see Darnell walking through the terminal, inconspicuously observing. He paused at gate C12 and watched her interact with a nervous couple trying to find connecting flights. She smiled, listened patiently, and offered clear directions. When their relief was obvious, Naomi gave a small nod and returned to her work. Later, Marcus, her supervisor, tapped her on the shoulder. He was impressed. Marcus whispered, "Your team's customer satisfaction scores are up. Complaints are down by nearly 30%. Naomi hid her delight. This was exactly the outcome they had hoped for. The company newsletter soon featured a story about gateways to respect, highlighting how a single apology had sparked a program transforming frontline service. Photos showed agents laughing together in a workshop, and quotes praised the new culture of empathy. Naomi's heart swelled as she read about agents who felt more confident, whose days felt more meaningful. Darnell's note at the end read, "Thanks to every one of you for choosing respect." Naomi framed that line in her mind as a personal motto. Months later, the initiative expanded to include flight attendants, customer service calls, and even ground crews. Naomi was invited to speak at the annual company conference, sharing her journey from embarrassment to empowerment. Standing at the podium, she told the audience how she had once allowed frustration to guide her words, and how a simple act of courage, admitting she was wrong, had changed everything. Applause echoed in the hall as agents from all over the country stood in appreciation. Late one evening, after a long day at the gate, Naomi sat alone in the break room, sipping a cup of tea. She thought back to that first moment with Darnell, the panic she felt when she learned who he was, and the relief she found in his forgiveness. She realized that every person she met, from hurried executives to giggling children, deserved consideration and kindness. Her uniform felt like a badge of honor now, not just a work outfit. She smiled, set her empty cup in the sink, and headed back to the gate, ready to greet tomorrow's travelers with an open heart and a clear mind. And though she would never forget the embarrassment of that early morning, she carried it with gratitude, knowing it had taught her, and her entire airline, how powerful respect could be.